Hey guys, tonight we're going to time travel somewhere stinky, slippery, and strangely soothing. 18th century Paris. Picture this. You're stepping off a creaky wooden carriage, the horses snorting, the wheels splashing through something suspicious. The sun is just beginning to set, casting a golden haze over cracked cobblestones and crooked alleys. But instead of romance and fresh baguettes, the first thing to hit you, the smell. Thick, sour, warm, and unmistakably canine. Because, you see, Paris in the 1700s has a bit of a dog problem. Not the barking, although there's plenty of that, but the leftovers. Everywhere, by the gutter, beside the bakery, outside the opera house. It's less city of light, more city of little brown surprises. And the locals? They've been stepping in it for generations. Sometimes metaphorically, sometimes very, very literally. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing just how far this sleepy little history train travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through the Porte Saint-Denis, the stone arch towering above like a lopsided triumph. There's chatter from a flower seller, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the squelch of your boot in something warm. You glance down. Yup, fresh. Dog again. It's everywhere. Parisians walk with a kind of resigned grace, sidestepping without looking, like pigeons in a plaza. They don't even flinch. The women lift their skirts ever so slightly, the men lean on their canes, and the street children, they laugh when a visitor missteps and lands on his derriere. You're just trying not to breathe too deeply. Now, to be fair, it's not just the dogs. The city's sanitation is famously bad, rubbish tossed from upper floor windows, chamber pots emptied with a warning yell if you're lucky, and open gutters snaking alongside the curb. But the dog mess? That's got its own category. Historians still argue whether there were actual city laws about dog waste in the 1760s, or if they were more informal guidelines enforced only when someone important got dirty. What we do know, things were getting worse. Dogs had become status symbols, especially for the elite. Big ones to guard estates, lap dogs to sit in powdered laps, and everything in between. Parisians loved their pooches and did not love the idea of cleaning up after them. You pass a portly gentleman walking a papillon in a silk ribbon. He watches it squat near a lamppost, nods approvingly, and strolls away, leaving behind a steaming statement of aristocratic indifference. And no one says a thing. One cobbler you pass sighs, wiping his stoop. 3 times today, he grumbles, flicking muck into the street with a curved wooden scraper. And they think the bread tax is the worst of it. You duck into a bakery to escape the smell, only to find it somehow worse inside. Heat rising, yeast thick in the air, and a mutt curled up by the oven. He's our mouser, the baker explains. Also our mascot. Don't mind the smell, it's mostly the chimney. Back on the street, it hits you just how normal this all is. Dog poop is part of the urban texture, like church bells or gossip. A walking hazard, yes, but also a bizarre kind of civic glue. Everyone deals with it, everyone complains, and yet nothing changes. Well, not yet. At the corner of Rue Saint-Honore, a newspaper vendor hands you a flimsy broadsheet. Another letter to the editor, he mutters. This time from a baroness who stepped in something on her way to the theatre. The letter is dramatic. Lots of words like indignity, public disgrace, and unfit for ladies. She's calling on the king to intervene. Again, it's the 4th such letter this month. You keep walking, watching how people dodge and weave. There's a rhythm to it. A little hop here, a shuffle there. One old man carries a wooden stick with a tiny brush on the end, casually sweeping his path as he walks, like a reverse Zamboni. No one's quite sure how many dogs there are in Paris, but one estimate from a century later guessed upward of 100,000. In the 1760s, it's likely fewer, but still a lot. And they're not shy. You see them in shop doorways, cafe corners, even inside churches. A priest you overhear during Mass mentions moral decay, and you're not entirely sure if he's talking about the city's soul or the soles of his shoes. By now, your nose has adjusted, kind of. The initial shock has faded into something more tolerable. Background scent with notes of hay, ash, and roast chestnut. You even catch yourself admiring how clean some streets aren't. It's like they've committed fully to the bit. Respect, in a way. As the sun dips low, lanterns begin to flicker to life, their yellow glow casting warm halos on the wet cobbles. A boy darts past barefoot, chasing a dog with a stick. Laughter echoes. A street musician strikes up a tune on a hurdy-gurdy, drawing a small crowd, and a large mutt who howls along, off-key but enthusiastic. You're starting to settle in. The noise, the smell, the movement. It all blurs into a kind of sleepy ballet. Every corner has a story. Every stoop a smear. And every Parisian's heel, just a little bit stained by the city they love. Welcome to Paris. The sidewalks may be treacherous, but the journey is oddly comforting. Just don't forget to check your boots before going to bed. You wake up to barking, not one dog, dozens. They yip, yowl and howl through the morning mist as the city stretches its aching joints. The bells of St. Eustache begin their daily toll, and somewhere nearby, a rooster gives an aggressive crow, as if offended it's still employed in this chaos. Paris, 1765, is crawling with dogs. You blink away the haze and look around. They're everywhere. Trotting along gutters, sniffing laundry lines, sleeping on warm stone steps. Big, small, pampered, scruffy. Some wear little collars with ribbons. Others have nothing but their flea colonies for company. But here's the thing no one really expected. There might be more dogs than kids. Historians still argue whether 18th century dog ownership numbers were exaggerated by social critics, but there's no denying it. You're in Canine Central. Your first encounter today is with a woman in an emerald green dress, her powdered wig slightly crooked. She's strolling with a trio of toy spaniels, each no larger than a dinner roll. They trot at her heels like perfume bottles come to life. When one stops to relieve itself beside a boot shop, she pauses delicately, fans herself and moves on with zero intent to clean anything. The shopkeeper just sighs, rolls his eyes and flicks sawdust over the mess. It's considered impolite to mention it directly, too base, too bodily. Instead, Parisians master the art of the passive-aggressive sigh and the carefully turned ankle. The mess is acknowledged through shared glances, not words, and it's everywhere. Aristocrats love their lapdogs. They're warm, they're fashionable, and, unlike children, they don't inherit anything or complain about corsets. The trend starts with the upper classes, ladies of leisure who cradle fluffy companions like accessories, and then filters downward. Merchants, bankers, even the occasional butcher begin acquiring their own four-legged friends. But there's a catch. These dogs may be tiny, but they're enthusiastic. You find this out firsthand while ducking into a silk shop. The duchess inside, who's examining ribbon, has six miniature greyhounds prancing about her hem. One squats beneath a bolt of taffeta. You don't say anything, but the clerk catches your eye. He gives a small nod. He knows. He always knows. Even pets of royalty aren't trained to be discreet. There's a long-standing story, still debated by historians, that Louis XV's mistress, Madame de Pompadour, once commissioned a jewelled brooch in the shape of her pug's, droppings, as a joke. Whether or not it's true, it says everything about the attitude toward clean-up. It's a noble inconvenience, something servants whisper about but never confront. You stroll past the Tuileries and see a courtier lecturing his companion about breeding practices. The trick, he says, is to raise a dog clever enough to recognise the rug from the parquet. His own dog promptly proves otherwise. By mid-morning, the streets start to bustle. Bakers carry trays of crusty loaves. Vendors yell about pears and salt fish. Chimney sweeps whistle off-key. And dogs, they weave through legs like they own the place. You pass a tired nursemaid with a toddler in one hand and a terrier on a string in the other. The terrier wins. He drags her across the lane toward a butter stand. Behind her, the toddler steps squarely in something brown, lets out a yelp and begins to cry. No one blames the dog. There's a growing tension beneath the laughter, though. A few city officials have started complaining. Quietly, cautiously, Paris is growing and its streets are turning from muddy village lanes into crowded urban arteries. What once washed away in the rain now festers. The dog population is outpacing the cleaning budget. And the cleaning budget was never particularly ambitious to begin with. You hear a butcher near the Pont Neuf shout at a mongrel sniffing his meat scraps. "Off, you cursed biscuit! he yells, swatting at it with a wet apron. But the dog just stares back, unfazed, before squatting right beside the chopping block. The butcher groans, wipes his hands on his chest, and mutters something about moving to Lyon. At a small printing shop, you find a pamphlet lying on the counter. The cover shows a caricature of a noblewoman shielding her nose with a lace fan as a dog squats behind her. The headline, Our Streets or Theirs, a canine crisis in 6 acts. It's satire but biting. You flip through it and chuckle at the imagined court decree requiring all poodles to wear corks. You wouldn't think of it at first, but dog poop is also shaping social customs. People begin choosing walking routes based not on beauty but on dryness. Shoes evolve slightly, more heel, more leather, and even children's games get modified to avoid the worst alleys. A version of hopscotch appears in one district that seems suspiciously useful for leaping over unpleasant surprises. You hear tell of one noblewoman who built a short wooden ramp from her coach to the door of the opera house, just so she'd never have to touch the street. She became the envy of every woman in town, and was once seen hurling a silver coin at a passing mutt in rage. No one remembers the performance that night, but they all remember the coin bouncing off the cobbles into a pile of something no longer solid. Even love life isn't immune. You eavesdrop on a couple breaking up at a cafe. The woman accuses the man of never minding where he steps. He argues back, "You knew I had a retriever." The waiter shrugs, wipes the table, and whispers to you that they'll be back next week, probably bringing the dog, he sighs. And just as you think you've seen it all, a coach rolls past, its wheels flinging something you really hope is just mud onto your boots. You try not to look down. Don't ruin the moment. Dog poop is more than just a nuisance, it's a way of life, an unscooped metaphor, an urban humbling agent. In a world of powdered wigs and delicate manners, it reminds everyone that nature, in all its pungency, still has the last laugh. You wake to the metallic rattle of wheels, small ones, squeaky and stubborn, scraping over cobblestones. You blink, stretch, and follow the sound through the misty morning light, drawn like a sleepwalker toward its rhythmic clunking. And there, ahead of you, hunched over a tin bin on a 2-wheeled cart, is your new mentor, a crottier. The name alone sounds like something you'd catch from drinking the Seine, yet here you are, handed a long-handled scoop, a set of linen gloves, already stained, and the promise of 5 sous if you can survive the day with your dignity intact. Your cart smells, well, let's just say, it doesn't come with a scented sachet. It's a wide tin bucket, fitted into a crude wooden frame, the word nettoyage scratched on one side, though there's nothing clean about it. And your tools? A slotted ladle for dry days and a squeegee for wetter circumstances. The crottier beside you, Claude, maybe, or was it Clovis, grunts as he demonstrates the delicate art of the scoop and slide. Always go in from the side, he says, unless it's fresh. Then don't bother, he chuckles. You do not. You trail him through the alleys of Le Marais, where the smell wafts up from between the paving stones. The dogs come and go like ghosts, leaving small, steaming offerings. Clovis points them out with a casual flick. Poodle, well-fed, chicken bones probably. He's got a nose like a truffle pig. You try not to be impressed. You're not alone in this trade, of course. There are dozens of crottiers across Paris, most unofficial, some tolerated, a few even paid by the city. They're the lowest of the low in the sanitation caste system, beneath the night soil men even. At least those guys only worked at night. And yet, they serve a vital role, if anyone cares to admit it. You work your way down Rue de la Ferronnerie, where the foot traffic is worst. People pretend not to see you, which is better than being mocked. One man whispers, "Look, a walking dung beetle," to his companion. A child laughs. Clovis flips them a 2-fingered salute and keeps pushing his cart like a king, but some, surprisingly, are grateful. A baker's apprentice tosses you a crust of bread as thanks. An old widow in slippers nods solemnly from her balcony. A young woman, even prettier than the dog she walks, gives you a smile of pity. You take what you can get. Along the way you pass signs posted by the city. Propre, respectez la voie publique. They're always fresh, painted, never enforced. Historians still argue whether these were meant to be moral appeals or bureaucratic theatre. Either way, they do little but give the pigeons something extra to aim at. The job isn't without hazards. You learn to dodge a fresh spill of chamber pot waste from a second straw window. Gardez-le, someone yells, only after it's too late. Your cart squeals as you swerve. Some of it hits Clovis. He doesn't break stride. Then come the dogs themselves. Not all are friendly. A grizzled mastiff growls as you approach his turf. You back away. That one thinks he's mayor, Clovis says. Probably runs this whole block. Midday sun brings out more walkers. Nobles with their perfumed spaniels, shopkeepers with mutts, washerwomen with shaggy beasts in tow. The routine repeats. Deposit, denial, departure, and behind them, you and Clovis, like slow-motion janitors in an endless parade. You pause in front of a cafe where the proprietor, a heavy-set man in a flour-dusted vest, watches the street with a broom in hand. "Don't bother here," he says. "I handle my own." And sure enough, the stoop is pristine. "Every morning at 6, he adds proudly. "My wife refuses to let customers step in, you know."
You know is about the most polite term you hear all day. Everyone has their euphemism. Les cadeaux du chien, le malheureux tas, les petits oublis. One old woman calls them pavement puddings, which almost makes you gag. Still, there are moments, brief, weirdly tranquil ones, when you find a rhythm. Scoop, deposit, scrape. The sun filters through laundry strung across alleyways. Someone plays a violin from a window. A breeze picks up, and for a second the smell clears. "Think I'll ever be promoted?" you ask Clovis. He snorts. "To what? Chicken plucker?" But you laugh anyway. The absurdity of it all is starting to lull you. You even begin to imagine yourself giving tips to future crow-tiers. Always going from the side. There's a rumor Clovis shares while you wait for a dog to finish its business behind a tavern. Irish widow furious about a mess outside her salon. Tried to hire her own private cleanup crew. Paid handsomely.
Then found out they were just smearing it further to keep their jobs. True story, he swears. She ended up moving to the countryside, said the cows had more manners. As you reach the Ile de la Cité, you see Notre Dame rise in the distance, proud and oblivious. Birds circle the towers. A dog lifts a leg on a bishop's carriage wheel, and the bishop doesn't notice. You and Clovis empty the cart into a fenced compost heap near a public garden where city gardeners will later use it sparingly in flower beds. And people say nothing grows in filth, Clovis mutters. By evening, your shoulders ache, your nostrils feel permanently burned, and your boots have seen things they'll never recover from. But there's a strange pride to it. You did something. You kept the city just slightly less unbearable. As Clovis pats you on the back, then immediately regrets the contact, you realize there's peace in the lowly job no one wants. Because while Paris struts and stinks, you've become part of the machine that keeps it from sinking entirely into muck. You push your cart into the shadows, the squeaky wheels now strangely comforting, and melt into the background, unseen, unsung, indispensable. You've barely washed the smell from your hands, well, mostly washed, when word begins to spread. Someone slipped. Not just anyone, a duke, and not just anywhere, right in front of Versailles. You weren't there, of course. Commoners don't exactly stroll up to the palace gates for fun, but you hear the story repeated at every bakery, wine stall, and barber chair. A tall man, powdered to perfection, steps out of a gold-trimmed carriage, lifts one embroidered boot, and splorch, down he goes, silk ribbons and dignity flying. The mess, reportedly, was left by a toy poodle named Violette. Her owner, the Comtesse de Bois Margot, who screamed louder than the Duke as her prize companion's deposit became royal history. You snort into your bread crusts. That's one way to inspire public policy. By dusk, a new proclamation is being posted on street corners in elegant calligraphy. By order of His Majesty, measures of cleanliness regarding the streets of Paris. The text is a beautiful mix of vague idealism and thinly veiled threats. The phrase civic hygiene is mentioned more than once. Offending materials, even more so. Fangs, it seems, has decided enough is enough. Or at least, someone in his circle has had enough of brown surprises on polished heels. Historians still argue whether this edict marked the beginning of serious sanitation efforts or was simply a grand gesture to appease the court's fashion casualties. Either way, it causes a stir. You follow the ripple through the streets the next morning. Vendors chatter about fines, barbers whisper of patrols. One man claims that dogs will now require licenses and printed laboratory schedules. That one turns out to be a joke. But there's genuine confusion too. Who's enforcing it? What counts as a violation? And more importantly, who's going to clean it? You pass a row of houses where servants have gathered at the stoop, huddled like storm survivors. One woman in a stained apron waves her rag in the air. "Are we supposed to chase the dogs now?" she cries. Another sighs. "My mistress won't even pick up her own fan." You spot Clovis again, pushing his cart with extra flair. "Guess we're important now," he says, grinning like a man promoted to Minister of Excrement. The new law isn't very specific, but that doesn't stop everyone from acting like it is. Shopkeepers sweep their steps twice as often. Bakers begin placing little signs, "No dogs without escorts." And one perfumer, visionary or lunatic, who's to say, starts selling street balm to apply under your nose. It smells like lemon and desperation. Even the dogs seem confused. They pause more before squatting, eyes shifting nervously. A few particularly clever ones lead their owners into alleys before doing their business. "They're adapting," mutters Clovis. "We're doomed." Yet enforcement is, as you might expect, uneven. The rich continue walking their canines like nothing's changed. One young marquis actually hires a small boy to follow behind with a silver tray. He calls it the Parade of Dignity, someone whispers. The tray has his crest on it. You nearly trip over a pamphlet flapping in the gutter. On the cover is a cartoon. Louis V stepping daintily over a steaming pile while two peasants clean the entire street behind him. The title reads, "Le roi ne marche pas dans les déchets." The king does not walk in waste. You laugh, but the mood in the city is shifting. Suddenly everyone's talking about cleanliness. The philosophers are having a field day. Voltaire reportedly quips that the law solves nothing but does so elegantly. Rousseau insists that dogs, as natural beings, should not be repressed by artificial decorum. Of course, Rousseau also liked to walk barefoot, so his opinion is somewhat biased. One priest preaches an entire sermon on the moral rot of dog leavings, connecting it to spiritual laziness and societal decay. You suspect his real problem is someone tracked something into the pews. Even the brothels get in on it. One particularly ambitious madam installs a courtyard commode for client pets. It's a shallow pet filled with sand and rose petals. You don't ask whether it's actually used. Meanwhile, the fines start trickling in. A man in the Marais is charged 2 livres for allowing a poodle to soil the corner of a cheese stall. Another is accused of willful neglect of leash protocol, whatever that means. But the most famous fine goes to Madame Dufresne, a salon hostess whose spaniel relieved itself in front of the Académie Française. The incident causes such a scandal that someone writes a play about it. You attend a performance. The spaniel is played by a child in a fur coat. It is somehow both tragic and hilarious. Despite the absurdity, you notice something else. The streets really do start to look a little better. Not clean exactly, and chaotic. A few neighbors even pool money for shared brooms and buckets. Children begin playing Spot the Scoop, awarding imaginary points to the most attentive owners. You hear rumors of an inventor developing a portable collection satchel. It's a canvas bag with a spoon attached. The future, he insists. He is laughed out of the tavern. Still, the edict's impact lingers. Even if it's mocked, it marks a line, an official acknowledgement that stepping in poop is in fact annoying. That city life, however elegant or enlightened, still requires the occasional scrub. And at night, when the lanterns flicker and the city's bustle dies down, you pass a pair of young lovers sitting on a bench. The girl rests her head on the boy's shoulder. The boy strokes her hand. And beneath the bench, a small, polite spaniel wagging its tail, doing absolutely nothing scandalous. Maybe the law's working after all. It's been a week since the royal poop edict, and already the city walks a little taller. Well, not taller, just more carefully. You, like everyone else, now carry a kind of mental map. Places to avoid, curbs with suspicious smears, that one cafe where a terrier always seems to strike at noon. But if you're going to survive these streets with your boots and pride intact, you'll need more than a good memory. You'll need technique. Enter the Parisian walking stick. Not the elegant, ivory-tipped kind used to impress mistresses or dual rivals, but the humble bâton de trottoir. A simple wooden rod, thick as your thumb and worn smooth with use. It's not for support, it's for detection. You tap it gently as you go, not ahead of you, but beside and behind. The truly seasoned locals have a rhythm to it. Tap, tap, step, tap, tap, shuffle. A kind of urban echolocation for solace you'd rather not meet directly. Historians still argue whether this was a formally taught etiquette or just a behavior absorbed by necessity. Either way, you learn it fast. At Rue des Lombards, a well-dressed man in a cobalt waistcoat demonstrates the sweep and swerve using his stick like a fencing foil to gently redirect a pile into the gutter. "Might save your morning," he says, nodding politely as he strolls away. "His shoes you notice shine like glass, yours don't." In the salons and drawing rooms, walking technique has even become a subject of genteel debate. One etiquette guide, La Grace de la Rue, devotes an entire chapter to navigating pavement with poise. It recommends shortened strides to allow for last-minute course corrections, eyes forward, but peripheral vigilance. And curiously, a faint smile to disarm suspicion and preserve elegance even when disaster strikes. You try it. Step, step, smile. Step, squint, shuffle. The lady passing you does not seem disarmed, but at least you don't fall. Fashion responds in its own sly way. Boot heels become a little taller, toes slightly more pointed, allowing for precision pivoting. There's even a brief trend of attaching thin brass scraping blades to the soles until someone slips on the brass and breaks a rib. That fad dies quickly. You overhear a group of university students near the Sorbonne, one of them claiming his professor insists that dog avoidance has now become a metaphor for life itself. "The path is never clean," he intones dramatically, "but we walk it nonetheless." Back in the real world, you watch a woman in an emerald cloak use her parasol like a cattle prod to guide her poodle toward a bush. "You know better, Cesar," she mutters. The poodle, naturally, does not know better. Later, a friend invites you for a walk through the Promenade Plantée, a raised walkway where dog traffic is supposedly lower. You're skeptical, but the air is clearer, the views over the rooftops pleasant, and best of all, there's a municipal porter at each end holding buckets and brooms. One porter even offers you a pamphlet, Les Rues Propres, a citizen's duty. You flip through it. The illustrations are oddly charming. Tiny dogs with guilty expressions, owners caught mid-gas, and a recurring pigeon who appears to be laughing. It's hard not to smile. You test your new skills that afternoon along the Rue Saint-Denis, once infamous for its uneven cobbles and dubious puddles. You step with confidence, twirling your stick like a musketeer on casual patrol. At one point, you sidestep a suspicious lump with such grace, a passing vendor claps. "Flawless execution," he laughs. "You should teach a class." Not all hazards are visible, of course. One puddle outside a pastry shop looks harmless, just water from the day's rain. You're wrong. It's a minefield. The smell hits as you pass. You don't look back. Inside the shop, you share the trauma with the baker, who nods sagely. "Always trust the pigeons," he says. "If they won't land near it, you shouldn't step in it." You take that advice to heart. Later, you join a friend for tea near Place Dauphine, and a local artist pulls out his latest sketch, a satirical map of Paris showing zones of highest olfactory risk. These mark little skulls where famous incidents occurred, including the Duke's Fall and the cheese stall disaster. There's even a safe stroll route highlighted in pink. It's absurdly comforting. That night, as the city winds down and shutters creak close, you pass an elderly man guiding a small dog in a neat little loop around a fountain. He likes to go where it echoes, he explains. The dog looks up, snorts once, and squats. The man sighs, pulls a napkin from his pocket, and carefully scoops. You tip your hat to him. He nods back. A moment of mutual respect among those who dare walk the gauntlet. In this world of powdered wigs and powdered noses, there's something delightfully grounding about navigating dog poop. It demands awareness, humility, and a little humor. And in a way, it makes every successful stroll feel like a minor victory. So you keep walking. Thick in hand, eyes sharp, ankles agile, a silent, smiling participant in the most underappreciated dance of Parisian life. Morning in Paris, and the streets are waking with their usual rattle and clatter, fruit carts, gossip, distant bells, and the occasional yelp from someone who didn't quite look where they stepped. You, however, have graduated beyond such rookie errors. With your practiced sidesteps and walking stick flicks, you move through the chaos like a noble in disguise, almost. But today you're headed somewhere special. The Hotel de Ville. Not for justice, not for taxes, for dog poop. You arrive outside the austere stone facade just in time to catch the tail end of a minor debate, quite literally. Two city clerks are arguing beside the steps, one holding a rolled-up ordinance and the other gesturing toward a small brown spot by the lamppost. "You see," says the first, "it's right there, and no one does anything." A third man strolls by and mutters, "Perhaps it's a protest." Welcome to the city's first official attempt at dog-dropping documentation. That's right, you're here to witness the birth of bureaucracy's least glamorous cousin, Paris's earliest municipal cleanliness record-keeping. Inside, the room smells of ink, wax, damp wool, and mild despair. At a long table, under flickering candlelight, a clerk dips his quill and begins the day's tally. Every pile spotted by city workers is noted. Time, street, approximate dimensions, and, if possible, the suspected breed responsible. Rue Saint Martin, medium-sized, terrier-like origin, he mumbles, scribbling. Rue Mouffetard, large, possibly mastiff, very assertive texture. It's absurd. It's glorious. And somehow it's all part of the growing movement to chart, track, and maybe one day solve the issue. Historians still argue whether this record-keeping had any real impact or was just a clever way to keep underemployed clerks busy. Some say it was a precursor to modern civic reporting. Others suspect it was satire that got out of hand. You lean in, watching as one assistant tries to draw a sketch of the day's most offensive incident. He uses only brown ink. You decide not to ask what kind. The city's sanitation board, such as it exists, is a small but ambitious group. Mostly middle-tier bureaucrats fed up with aristocratic dogs and citizen complaints. They call themselves Les Amis du Pave, the Friends of the Pavement. Their motto, for each step, a clear path. They're responsible for the pamphlets, the little warning posters, even a series of comically oversized spoons placed at major intersections to raise awareness. Yet steal them within days. Still, there's movement. A modest budget is carved out for what they call direct urban filth engagement. It funds 4 additional courtiers, a part-time educator to give lectures on proper dog etiquette, and, most surprisingly, a trial campaign of painted sidewalk signs with little illustrations. You see one near Pont Maurier, a golden retriever, eyes wide, tail down, with a sad little puff behind it. And the caption, "Je regrette." You pause, you chuckle, you step around a real pup nearby and salute whoever made the sign. At a cafe near the Hotel de Ville, the owner shakes his head. "They're trying to assign fines by breed now," he says, as if my hound is plotting rebellion. Behind him, the hound is licking spilled cider off the floor. He looks profoundly unbothered. Some Parisians take it further. One bookseller starts leaving out poetic descriptions of daily droppings. Today, a wistful curl beside the tobacconist. Delicate aroma, undeniably beagle. Locals begin placing bets on tomorrow's appearance. Meanwhile, the elite find ways to circumvent even this. You hear whispers of one duchess who trains her lapdog to only relieve itself indoors on a marble slab that servants then whisk away and rinse with rose water. More sanitary, she claims, also easier to supervise. There's also a scandal brewing in the art world. A painter, frustrated by the city's obsession with cleanliness, creates an enormous canvas titled Les Traces du Chien. It features stylized turds arranged in the shape of Paris itself. The critics are outraged. The young are enchanted. Someone tries to hang it in a salon. It's banned within a week. Still, civic attention is a strange thing. Once it's focused on a problem, even absurdly, it has a way of shifting behavior. You begin to notice fewer incidents near high-traffic boulevards. Dogs are led with more purpose. Owners peer over their shoulders. One old man even drags a small sled behind his dog, lined with newspaper. He's sensitive, the man says. Doesn't like to be watched. At Place des Vosges, you come across a trio of musicians playing a gentle waltz, children dance. A woman toils with her dachshund on a leash. And right behind her, unnoticed, a courtier in a crisp waistcoat gently scrapes the pavement. It nods at the setting sun. You sit beside a lamppost, watching the traffic of people, dogs, and carts. The street's still messy. Of course it is, but it's less messy, more mindful. And somewhere in the Hotel de Ville, a clerk scribbles, "Today, 23 incidents, fewer than last week, progress noted." For a city of dreamers, rebels, and pastry eaters, that's practically a revolution. You're barely out the door when the bell on the baker's cart jingles and a new sound reaches your ears, clanking, creaking, and a faint shh like water splashing over stone. You turn the corner just in time to see a curious contraption lumbering past, a barrel on wheels pulled by 2 tired-looking horses and operated by a man in a leather apron. The side of the barrel reads, Compagnie des Arosec Publics the street sprinkling company. You've heard of them, part sanitation and part performance art. They are Paris's attempt to soften the scent of the city, especially after heavy dog traffic. The erosions ride through town with barrels full of slightly perfumed water spraying the cobbles to push the filth to the gutters. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing, and it's oddly beautiful. The water fans out in curved arcs. Children chase it, dogs bark at it. A young woman lifts her skirt just high enough to avoid the splash, then laughs when a drop hits her shoe anyway. You follow the cart for a while, hypnotized. It's slow, steady, and vaguely musical. Closh, clunk, splash, and as the damp scent of lavender soap runoff reaches your nose, you realize this is the closest thing to a bath your boots have had in weeks. Historians still argue whether these early water carts were more decorative than effective, but many agree they laid the groundwork for Paris's modern sewer system and for the psychological trick of feeling clean even when the filth was only slightly diluted. You stop to watch the Irisher himself. His hands are calloused, his mustache crooked, and he whistles as he works. Every so often he yells, "Move your feet!" to unsuspecting bystanders before dousing a puddle with surprising precision. He nods at you. The secret, he says, is timing. Can't just soak it, you have to chase it. You're not entirely sure what he means, but it sounds wise. Nearby, a fishmonger shakes his head as a new puddle glistens in front of his stall. "You know, sometimes I think the dogs wait for the water," he grumbles, like it's a challenge. You wander through the 7th arrondissement, watching other carts do their rounds. Some spray wide, lazy arcs, others use tight nozzles for gutter flushing. The best ones are timed for just after sunrise, so by midday most streets glisten slightly, like frosting on an uneven cake. But the system isn't perfect. The water smells better than what it's washing away, yes, but often just masks the problem. And sometimes the damp cobbles become slick. You witness 2 near slips and one very real pratfall when a gentleman tries to sidestep a spaniel and ends up in the gutter himself. Still, public opinion is generally positive. People like the symbolism of it. "It makes us feel more civilized," says a dressmaker, watching the cart pass. Like we're not just animals pretending to wear wigs. And it's true. The carts have a strange dignity. Maybe it's the predictability, the sheer persistence. Maybe it's the men themselves who wear their roles like medals. Or maybe it's just that in a city often indifferent to practical concerns, someone is finally doing something. You cross into a neighborhood less fortunate where no carts roam. The difference is immediate. The air is heavier. The dogs roam unbothered. A boy kicks a can, then recoils when it lands in a questionable puddle. You ask a shopkeeper about the discrepancy. He sighs. "We asked, said we didn't have enough public value." He spits. "Guess rich dogs get better streets." That night, back in the more fragrant part of town, you stumble upon a new innovation, the Rue Parfumée. It's a pilot project. One street lined with flower boxes and laced with spritzers. Every 15 minutes, a hidden pipe releases a puff of violet and citrus. The idea, someone explains, is to reclaim the air. A young entrepreneur plans to turn it into a subscription service. "Pick your scent," he boasts. "Lilac, mint, or clove." You smile. It's ludicrous. It might work. You imagine future generations of Parisians growing up thinking city streets always smelt faintly of bergamot. And in the same breath, you sidestep a glistening swirl left by an overfed poodle named, if you overheard correctly, Voltaire. Before heading home, you catch one last glimpse of the aerosaur's cart rounding a corner, lit by the warm flicker of gas lamps. Water sparkles behind it. A dog trots in the spray. A woman lifts her hem just in time. And for a moment, all the absurdity of city life softens. Maybe the streets aren't clean yet, but they're trying. And somehow, that's enough to help you sleep a little easier tonight. You wake to the sound of barking, distant, rhythmic echoing down the alley like a medieval alarm clock. A dog choir, probably. You stretch, groan, and prepare for another day on the Parisian poop front lines. But today, your destination is different. The Louvre. Not for art, not for culture, not even for the gardens. You're here for dogs. Specifically, a secret network of noble women quietly trying to civilize them. It begins, as so many strange things do, with a rumor that Madame de la Rochefoucauld, duchess, scholar, and occasional fencing enthusiast, is training her dogs to observe appropriate street etiquette, that is, to go only in designated spots, preferably in her own garden, and ideally after a trumpet cue. Absurd, naturally, but not unheard of. Historians still argue whether these stories were exaggerated mockeries or based in truth. What's clear is that in certain elite circles, training dogs to not embarrass you became something of a personal mission. And for the most ambitious, it was a form of status. You follow a trail of whispers through salons and courtyards until you find it. A dusty rear chamber in the Lou's lesser wing, where a handful of noble women gather, not for tea or poetry, but for Le Corum de Decorum Canyon, the dog decorum program. You stand in the doorway, slightly stunned. There are carpets, cushions, tiny gold bowls, and a row of dogs lined up like soldiers in a very confusing war. A woman in a powdered wig claps twice. The dogs sit. Another gesture. They raise paws. A third, and astonishingly, one trots to a corner, squats over a tray of sand, and receives applause. "Brava, mignonette," someone cries. The dog pants, clearly pleased with herself. You sit in on the session, pretending to be a concerned citizen. The instructor, a man with a pocket full of biscuits and a voice like a violin, walks you through the process. Positive reinforcement, limited social shame, and an understanding of the animal's bladder cycle. He says proudly, you're given a pamphlet, Latte Education Canine, pour les dames, that outlines the expected behaviors, including proper garden etiquette, timing according to household meal cycles, avoiding political events or religious ceremonies. There's even a chapter on expressive tail management, which you suspect is more about aesthetics than utility. You marvel at the dedication. These women are not merely pet owners. They are disciplinarians, artists, dreamers. And while most of Paris still navigates a minefield of canine chaos, these few attempt to create a parallel world, one with little waste, no surprises, and neatly folded handkerchiefs, just in case. Outside the palace, the world is less refined. You follow a dog down Rue de Rivoli, who stops at every corner to sniff, squat, or both. No noble woman claps. No tray appears. Just life, messy and unconcerned. But the idea spreads. Soon, you hear of others attempting similar methods, some with poodles, others with spaniels. One man, a bookseller in the Latin Quarter, builds a series of ramps and miniature privies in his courtyard. He claims his beagle is now clockwork accurate. You pass by his shop one day and see the dog scratch at the door, dash to the back, and relieve himself over a flower pot labeled private use only. The man bows as if introducing a ballet. You clap, lightly. Meanwhile, the pamphlets multiply. You find them tucked into corset boxes, pinned to church doors, and even copied into gossip newsletters. One edition features a comic titled The Trained Terrier vs. the Minister's Mischief. It ends predictably with a ruined wig and a very smug terrier. You ask Clovis what he thinks of all this. He snorts. Dogs are dogs. Train them all you want, but they'll still surprise you, like politicians. Still, even Clovis can't deny a change in the air. You begin to see more dog owners walking with purpose, pausing at lampposts, redirecting sniffers, even whispering words of encouragement. One lady carries a folded carpet for emergency containment. Another claims she's teaching her dachshund Latin commands. A group of children near the Luxembourg Gardens invent a game, Pretend Parade. They lead invisible dogs through an imaginary street, stopping every few steps to bow, mime cleanup, and march on. It's ridiculous. It's wonderful. One evening, you attend a masquerade ball where someone has come dressed as the ideal dog owner. They wear a velvet coat covered in scoops, leashes, scented sachets, and a small painted sign reading, "Ask me about decorum." Half the room does. The other half chuckles nervously and steps away. Even philosophers begin to weigh in. One anonymous essay in a broadsheet muses, "What separates us from beasts? Clean footwear and foresight." Another responds, "Perhaps nothing, given the current state of the Rue Montorgueil." Yet the enthusiasm continues. At an outdoor poetry reading, a poet recites, "Though kings may ride and lords may dine, 'tis he who scoops who draws the line." You nearly fall off the bench laughing. That night, walking home, you pass a neatly swept alley. At the entrance is a sign, "Chien bien élève, bienvenue," well-behaved dogs welcome. A spaniel trots in behind you, pauses, lifts his leg on a rose bush, and glances back like, "What?" Well, he tried. By now, you've seen Paris try just about everything short of installing miniature toilets for dogs. Although, give it time. You've dodged more droppings than you can count, walked in sync with the odors, and even attended a canine etiquette class in the Louvre. But today, you're heading somewhere far messier, far louder, and somehow far more hopeful. You're off to the markets. Les House, to be specific, the belly of Paris, where fish meet flowers, gossip meets garlic, and dogs, well, dogs do as they please. Here, the rules are a little softer, the ground a little stickier, and the air, a mingled perfume of fruit, meat, sweat, and mischief. You arrive just as the stalls open. Vendors flap from crate to crate, a chicken escapes, causing a minor stampede. And beneath it all, dozens of dogs weave and trot between carts, baskets, boots, and ankles like furry anarchists on a mission. One of them, a small mutt with ears too large for his head, stops at your feet and sneezes. Then he squats, looks you directly in the eye, and does his business beside a pile of leeks. He trots off, unashamed. You look around, no one reacts. In the markets, dog behavior is tolerated, even expected. A fishmonger shrugs, scoops the mess into a tin pail, and moves on. At least he didn't go in the scallops, she mutters. Here, civic order gives way to something else, market logic, which is to say chaos with its own rhythm. Historians still argue whether this tolerance was out of practicality, poverty, or sheer sensory overload, but to this day, it's remembered as one of the few places where dogs and people truly coexisted, neither ruled nor reprimanded. You follow the pail-carrying fishmonger. Her name is Bernadette, and she's been here 20 years. The dogs know me, she says, nodding at a particularly ragged-looking dachshund curled in a cabbage crate. That one prefers trout heads. Bernadette points out the informal poop patrol, a group of stallholders who've agreed to take turns scraping the main walkway before peak hours. Not for the public, she clarifies. For us, can't be selling celery next to dog stuff. The patrol is effective, if not glamorous. They wear aprons, boots, and expressions of weary pride. One of them whistles as he works using a wide, flat blade attached to a broom handle. He calls it le loup de la rue, the tongue of the street. A few stalls have taken matters into their own hands. The spice vendor, for instance, sprinkles dried rosemary and crushed pepper around his setup, not just for scent, but because dogs don't like walking on it. It's my defensive perimeter, he grins. If they breach it, I salute them. You watch as a particularly curious schnauzer approaches, sniffs the rosemary, snorts, and backs away with exaggerated disgust. A win for aromatics. Elsewhere, an old man has fashioned a sort of dog corner out of crates and hay. It's not official, but it's known dogs go there to sniff, nap, or do their business. He occasionally sprinkles lime on the ground and mumbles prayers to Saint Roach, patron of dogs and, apparently, public cleanliness. In a side alley, you stumble on a handwritten sign. Dogs may eliminate here. Humans, please look down. Below it, a chalk outline of a paw print. 3 dogs are already queuing up, no leash in sight. You meet one man selling fruit from a cart who proudly displays a tiny silver bell around his terrier's neck. When he squats, I hear the jingle, he explains, gives me time to prepare. You ask what prepare means. He holds up a small shovel and a jar of sawdust. We've got systems. Despite the mess, there's something comforting here. No one pretends the problem doesn't exist, but they found a way to live with it, to expect it, to respond with humor, not outrage. A parent sets up an easel near the cheese stand and begins sketching a scene. A woman balancing a basket on her head, a child reaching for a pear, a dog mid-squat. He's titled at Le Joie de la Rue. You ask if he'll add a scoop, he winks. Depends who buys it. At one corner, you hear laughter. A puppeteer is performing a short street play. The Misadventures of Monsieur Pom Pom, featuring a dog puppet who tries to behave but keeps getting distracted by smells, sausages, and eventually a very angry vegetable seller. The audience claps. A child yells, "He's just like our biscuit." You grab a pastry and sit for a while, taking in the glorious mess. This is not the Paris of salons or perfume water carts. It's not the law-abiding city of bureaucrats with their droppings ledger. This is real Paris. Greasy, fragrant, chaotic, and deeply alive. And somehow, the dogs fit right in. As you head home, you pass a terrier licking a spot near a butcher's stall. You pause, he pauses, a moment of mutual acknowledgement, then he lifts one paw as if to salute and trots off. You're not sure if he was trained or just very polite. The morning after Les Howes, your boots are crusted, your nose is confused, and your heart, somehow lighter. Still, a question itches at you as you walk the quieter streets near the Marais. Why are there so many dogs in Paris to begin with? And more importantly, who do they all belong to? Turns out the answer is complicated. See, dogs in 18th century Paris aren't quite like today's pampered pooches or microchipped companions with Instagram accounts. Many of them roam untethered, not stray exactly, but not strictly owned either. They belong to households, to street corners, to bakers and butchers and beggars alike. They are community creatures, as much a part of the neighborhood as chimney soot and gossip. You pass one lounging on a bakery stoop. His name is Jacques. No collar, no leash, but he shows up every morning at 7 o'clock, flops beside the window, and receives one warm croissant in without fail. The baker insists Jacques was left to him by a retired soldier. The truth is probably more instinctive. Jacques chose his baker. This soft ownership is part of what makes the poop problem so persistent. No one really claims the dogs until they do, and even then, enforcement is tricky. You hear tales of the municipal inn registrar, the man charged with recording dog ownership in certain quarters. He carries a list, a quill, and oddly, a feather duster for scaring off fleas before inspection. Do you have a dog? He asks. No. What's that behind you? A cousin. The laws surrounding pet ownership are vague, especially for the working class. Owning dog is not forbidden, but any issues, bite, theft, excrement can suddenly cause ownership to be thrust upon you by force. A washerwoman recounts being fined for a dog she insists isn't hers. He just follows me, always has. How do you stop that? She asks. You don't have a good answer. Historians still argue whether this wise semi-ownership was encouraged by authorities to avoid responsibility or if it was simply too costly to regulate. Some scholars even suggest dogs functioned as informal street sweepers, consuming scraps, chasing off rats, and sometimes, blessing of worse. You hear one courtier laugh about it. Sometimes the dogs eat the mess of other dogs. Nature's cleanup crew. You're horrified, also impressed, mostly horrified, but not all canines are free roaming. Some live with pride and purpose, the guardian dogs of warehouse districts, trained to bark at anyone without a uniform. Others are companion animals for the lonely rich, dyed pink, ribboned, and perfumed until they resemble floral arrangements with paws. You spot one such creature in a carriage, its nose pressed to the glass, its expression both curious and exhausted. The man beside it wears 3 rings on one hand and carries a satin cushion. You lock eyes with the dog. It sneezes. Then there are the dogs of the poor, often mutts, often mangy, but fiercely loyal. You see one curled beside a sleeping man beneath the Pont Neuf. Another follows a group of rag pickers like a knight in shaggy armor. These dogs are watchdogs, bed warmers, companions in hunger. When one is lost, the mourning is real and loud. You overhear a funeral procession of sorts near the canal. 4 men carrying a small box, one woman weeping, and a flute player playing something surprisingly jaunty. You ask, and someone whispers, "Old Biscuit, best rat hound on the block. Never barked once unless it mattered." The city knows these dogs. They are remembered. At the veterinary stall in the marketplace, rudimentary, mostly herbal. You ask what kinds of injuries are most common. Foot cuts from broken glass, the old woman says, or burns from hot urine on cobblestones. You pause, unsure which part disturbs you more. She sighs and gives a salve to a boy with a limping pup. "Tell your maman it's free," she adds. A clean dog is everyone's blessing. The dogs themselves, of course, don't care about legal status. They sleep where it's warm, bark where it's loud, and do their business where the mood strikes. You watch one pause at a corner, sniff, lift his leg, and then pause again. Decides not to, moves on. You applaud his restraint. The church even has something to say about it. In a sermon you overhear near Notre Dame, the priest compares human sin to the evidence of a dog in the street, unseen at night and only regretted in daylight. A boho metaphor. The congregation giggles, but the real surprise comes when you stumble upon a small plaque in a side street near Rue de l'Arbre Sec. Faded, but legible. It reads, "Here once lived Duchesse Marie, and with her beloved Montpellier, the cleanest dog in Paris. May others follow his noble paws." Below it, someone has drawn a chalk paw print, fresh. As you walk home, you realize how much Paris's dogs shape its rhythms, not just in messes left behind, but in footsteps altered, routes rerouted, moments paused. Every pile tells a story, every bark a warning, every sidestep a shared understanding. You pass Jacques again. He's asleep now, one paw twitching in a dream. The baker leans out and shakes his head. He chased a cat today, first time in months. Did he win, you ask? No, he smiles, but he tried. You're back in the Latin Quarter, sipping weak coffee on a bench that's probably older than democracy, when a commotion stirs just down the road. A crowd's gathering outside a modest townhouse where a man in a plum-colored coat is pacing like he's about to deliver a one-man play. Someone whispers, "It's him, the pamphlet man." You move closer. Of course, you've heard of him. Monsieur Girard, a eccentric philosopher, professional scribbler, and self-declared defender of the soiled. This man has published an entire series of short satirical pamphlets, De la mer et de l'homme, on filth and man, arguing quite seriously that society can be understood through its treatment of dog waste. It's ridiculous, it's brilliant, it's selling surprisingly well. Today he's giving a public reading of his newest piece, The Social Contract of the Sidewalk. You wedge yourself into the crowd just in time to hear him proclaim, "The street belongs to all beings with feet," and that includes paws. There is scattered applause. One man shouts, "Tell that to my boots." The essay continues, drawing comparisons between ignored piles and ignored citizens, between noble dogs and corrupt officials, and at one point likens a spaniel's guiltless stare to Voltaire's prose. People are confused, people are captivated. Historians still argue whether pamphlets like Girard's were parody or sincere proto-social commentary. Some say they marked a shift towards seeing sanitation as part of civic virtue. Others claim Girard just liked to hear himself speak. Either way, people listen. After the reading, he sells copies out of a wheeled cart. One copy includes an etching of a very smug bulldog relieving itself on the steps of the assembly. A commentary, he says with a wink, "You buy two." As you walk away, a young woman stops you and asks, "Are you going to the meeting later?" You raise an eyebrow. Turns out there's more than one Girard in this city. A loosely organized group calling themselves Les Veaux du Pave, the Watchers of the Pavement, have begun meeting weekly to discuss street conditions, propose citizen-led cleanup routes, and distribute humorous flyers encouraging responsible dog habits. Their motto? Leave no trace but your shadow. You decide to go. The meeting is held in a back room of a tavern near Place Sainte-Geneviève. 20 people attend, shopkeepers, students, a midwife, a baker, and one retired soldier who mostly grumbles and smokes. The group leader, of a spectacled seamstress named Leonie, holds a candle in one hand and a folder in the other. "We gather not to complain," she begins, "but to imagine. A Paris where one may walk freely, where dignity is preserved not just in salons, but on every stone." Someone claps. Someone else drops a spoon. They share stories of particularly foul sidewalks, of unexpected successes, of a butcher's apprentice who built a clever scooping mechanism using a broken parasol and a garden hoe. They share coping techniques, cleanup hacks, and the location of the cleanest alley in the 3rd arrondissement. Then come the ideas, which is a citizens patrol, issuing polite notices to negligent owners, brightly colored kerchiefs for dogs who've graduated training, honor zones marked by chalk where no dog shall go, and perhaps most daringly, a public award, the Golden Boot, for the cleanest street in Paris. You volunteer a suggestion, putting humorous slogans near high traffic areas, like "Poop is not a Parisian perfume" or "Cobbles have feelings too." They love it. One man pulls out a sketch pad and starts drawing slogans with little top-hatted dogs beside them. By the end of the night, everyone's a little tipsy, a little inspired, and a lot more connected. You walk home under a flickering street lamp, thinking, maybe this isn't just about dogs. It's about how people respond to problems they're told are beneath them. At your doorstep, you see a fresh pile near the curb, but something's different. And next to it is a tiny wooden sign poking out from the stones. It reads, "I did my best. My owner did not." You look around, half expecting a pamphlet to flutter from the sky. None does. But in the distance, you hear someone whistling, a tune you heard in the tavern. The Watchers of the Pavement are already at work, and so are you. The sky over Paris is streaked with silver gray, threatening drizzle but delivering only drama. You decide it's the perfect day to investigate an odd rumor that somewhere in the outskirts, beyond the fashionable boulevards and scribbling philosophers, a man is attempting to build a machine. Yes, a machine to clean the streets of dog waste. Your destination? A dusty workshop near the Canal Saint-Martin. Inside, it smells like coal smoke, varnish, and wild inventions. Ears, pipes, broken umbrellas, and what appears to be a retired bread oven are all crammed together with a kind of inspired chaos. And there, hunched over a riveted box with flared goggles and a smudge of soot across his cheek, is the man himself. Monsieur Fabrice Duclos, Paris's first and possibly only dog waste engineer. He waves you in without looking up. Don't step on the lever. You look down, the floor is a nightmare of cables and mechanisms. There's something bubbling in a pot, something steaming in a tube, and in the corner, what appears to be a taxidermied pug mounted on a wooden stand labeled Prototype 1. Historians will remember me, he mutters, either as a genius or a cautionary tale. Duclos' invention, as he explains between wrench twist, is the ramasseur automatique de rue, the automatic street collector. Picture a small rolling cart powered by a foot pump and piston with a scoop in front and a sieve in the rear. It is part vacuum, part rake, part spectacle. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly. It will glide. It will gather. It will change everything. You're not the only one curious. A few neighborhood children peek through the windows. A dog barks outside and Duclos snaps, "Not yet," before returning to his gears. The test run is scheduled for the next morning. Word spreads fast. When you arrive, a modest crowd has gathered. A few courtiers, 2 skeptical officials, a group of students, and one extremely excited gentleman selling roasted chestnuts. Duclos appears in a patched cloak, like he's presenting a hot air balloon. "Behold," he cries, "the future of Parisian hygiene." He pumps a lever. The machine sputters to life, whirs, creaks, then begins to move. The scoop lowers. The wheels engage. It approaches its first target, a modest pile near the gutter, rolls over it, and successfully collects it into a compartment with a muffled plop. The crowd gasps. Applause. It collects a second, a third. Duclos beams. Science and civility, hand in hand. Then, disaster. Approaching its 4th target, the machine hits a loose cobblestone. The scoop jars, the back end stutters, something explodes in the rear mechanism, spraying bits of straw and, let's just say, collected material into the crowd. A direct hit to the chestnut vendor. Pandemonium. Duclos yells, version 2 will have shock absorbers. Still, despite the mess, the experiment makes an impression. Over the next week, local papers run headlines like "The Machine That Dared" and "Poo in Progress, a Parisian Tale." Satirists draw cartoons of the contraption with wheels on fire and terrified dogs fleeing in all directions. Historians still argue whether Duclos' invention was a noble failure or just a flashy stunt. Some say it inspired later mechanized sanitation efforts. Others suggest it served only to amuse and slightly traumatize his neighbors. You check in on him a few days later. He's unfazed. "I've already begun version 3, he says. Steam-powered with a bell. More inventors emerge. A watchmaker in Montparnasse unveils a clockwork leash attachment that chimes every time the dog stops for too long. A chimney sweep claims to have trained pigeons to peck at droppings until someone notices. A seamstress creates aprons with built-in pockets for sudden collection. The city is now in a kind of fecal arms race. Not to be outdone, a small theater troupe stages a parody opera by Les Jacques Dangerevises. It includes a tragic aria titled "Oh My Satin Shoe." Audience members cry and then laugh. Back in the center of town, the mayor hosts a private demonstration of cleaner alley alternatives. It features sawdust paths, scented oil drip lines, and trained goats. The goats are a hit until one eats a dispatch from the postmaster's bag. Still, the idea of innovation takes hold. Suddenly, dog waste is not just a nuisance, it's an opportunity, a public challenge. A place for the eccentric, the civic-minded, and the downright unhinged to leave their mark. Even school children get involved. One group creates a board game called Dodge That Do, where players must navigate Parisian streets using tokens, scent cards, and emergency handkerchiefs. It's weirdly popular. You walk home from another invention fair, this one featuring a catapult scoop hybrid, and realize something strange. People are laughing more, complaining less. The absurdity of the problem has bred not just creativity, but community. Paris hasn't solved its poop problem, not even close, but it has made it everyone's problem, which in a city this chaotic might be the first real step toward a solution. As you step over a fresh pile near your building, someone behind you says, "Careful." You nod. You both chuckle. A child runs past with a notebook, writing something, perhaps another inventor. You begin to wonder if enough people care even a little, what else might they fix? You're getting good at this now, dodging piles, reading dog body language, even predicting which corner is most likely to host an accident. But today your journey takes you away from invention and into something far subtler. Manners, not canine manners, human ones. You're walking through a quieter arrondissement where the streets are lined with cafes and the pace is slower. At one such cafe, a sign hangs above a tidy terrace. Civismo commence sous vos semelles. Civility begins beneath your soles. You smirk. That's new. Inside, a waiter tells you the cafe has joined something called Les Cercles de Semelles Propres, the Clean Soul Circles. It's not an official organization, but rather a growing trend. Groups of residents forming informal neighborhood pledges to keep their streets cleaner, not by force, but by example. Think neighborhood watch, but for poop. Each circle has its own rules, slogans, and even ceremonies. You're invited to one. That evening, you join a dozen Parisians beneath the ivy-draped arch of a courtyard. There's mulled wine, a harpist, and a curious little table with a velvet cloth draped over it. Atop it rests an old shoe, bronze polished and slightly lopsided. The ceremony begins. A woman reads aloud from La Maximègue de la Chaussure, a slim booklet of community-written sayings like, "What's beneath you reflects what's within you. Honor thy neighbor's path. A clean soul, a clear soul." Then, the ritual. Each member steps forward, taps the bronze shoe with their own, and vows, aloud or silently, to avoid fouling their street, to encourage others to clean up, and to honor the dignity of every cobblestone. You do the same, try not to grin. A toast follows, laughter, then someone produces a poem. Beneath each arch a mark may lie, but so may effort clean and spry. To walk with care, to step with grace, is how a city finds its face. You sip your wine and glance around. These people are nobles or lawmakers. They're bakers, seamstresses, violin teachers, and somehow they've turned a public nuisance into a shared value. Historians still argue whether these circles had real, lasting impact or simply made people feel better about a problem too large to fully solve. But the records show that neighborhoods with active circles reported fewer street complaints and more laughter. The next day, you spot a circle in action. A man drops a flyer into a mail slot that reads, "Did you forget your scoop today?" The street remembered. It's not aggressive. It's almost flirtatious. A woman responds by chalking a tiny paw print with a heart around it. These gestures multiply. A window box filled with free paper cones labeled for spot spots. A mural of a dog holding a broom painted by school children. No poo zones stenciled beside bakery stoops with little bouquets beside them. Tease not enforcement, it's artful suggestion, a culture shift. You meet a cobbler who's taken things further. Every time someone tracks in mess, he cleans their shoes for free, but asks them to sign his register of regret. It's a thick book full of apologies, poems, and one rather good limerick. A dachshund from deep Montparnasse left a gift in front of my glass. I stepped in it blind, then politely declined to pretend it was merely the grass. Some people fake their entries just to read the others. Meanwhile, etiquette books begin to include full chapters on urban courtesy and the animal companion. One even lists tethered toileting practices and includes diagrams. Another suggests gifting lavender sachets to frequent offenders. Subtle but pointed. And inevitably, the satire rolls in. You pass a street artist with a sign that reads, "Public shaming, 1 franc per verse." For that price, he'll write a 2-line poem about your neighbor's failure to clean up. The best of the day. Gene forgot his little bag. Now we all must do the drag. It's pinned on a door with a clothespin. Gene responds with one of his own the next day, offering apologies and a box of almond cakes. It's absurd. It's delightful. But beyond the jokes, you sense something deeper taking root. You hear it in conversations. Should we clean the path before guests arrive? Maybe we move the potted plants. Dogs love that corner. Ring the bell for Marcel, just in case he squats. There's a new kind of pride forming. Not lofty, not fussy, just quietly civic. And for once, it's not driven by fear of fines or social scorn, but by shared understanding that the city belongs to everyone. Even the dogs, especially the dogs. As you turn down your street, you spot a small plaque tucked beside a lamppost. It reads, "To the people who tried and the people who reminded them." You smile. It's not a revolution, but it's something. It's raining in Paris, a soft misting kind of rain that smooths the rooftops and turns the cobblestones into a patchwork of glistening black mirrors. The perfect weather, one might say, for tracking footprints or paw prints. You wrap your coat tighter and head for the banks of the Seine. You've heard whispers, curious ones, that the Sanitation Guild is experimenting with something entirely new, tracking dogs by their droppings. Not in a sinister way, more scientific. It begins, you learn, with a simple idea, that each dog, like each person, leaves behind a unique pattern, a signature, and that perhaps with close observation, the most prolific offenders might be identified, studied, even politely discouraged. You arrive at a small booth beside the river where three men in matching overcoats and waxed mustaches huddle over parchment maps. They call themselves Les Cartographers, Canines. The canine cartographers. You peer over their shoulders and behold something amazing, a massive hand-drawn map of Paris, dotted with little red X's. Notes like suspected retriever or frequency 3x/week, and sketches of paws, tails, even approximate squatting stances. You laugh, you can't help it. One of them, Etienne, looks up proudly. "We've been observing for 6 weeks. Rue Saint-Honoré is dominated by a limp-legged terrier. The Place Dauphine, pure spaniel territory. When we suspect a conspiracy near the butcher's quarter." You ask, "Is it working?" He shrugs. "We're not fixing the problem exactly, but we're seeing it. And once you see it, it's very hard to unsee." You join them for a while, watching from benches, noting patterns, dogs with favorite corners, owners who pretend not to notice, one man who swears he always cleans up, but suspiciously leaves the scene whistling when his pug does the deed behind a statue. Historians still argue whether this sort of mapping effort was proto-urban planning or just eccentric play. Either way, it becomes unexpectedly influential. Soon, the map spread. One appears in a newspaper anonymously, and then another is turned into a print, The Parisian Dogscape, a study in brown. People start referencing zones in conversation. Careful, you're entering sector muck. Eventually, someone hangs a giant version in a public square with colored chalk so citizens can add updates themselves. A collaborative work of gross, yet earnest, urban record keeping. And then something changes. You walk into a bakery and see a man studying the map while sipping his coffee. "There's a pile near my doorstep every Thursday," he mutters. "According to this, it's probably Jacques?" You blink. Jacques? The stoop-dwelling dog from earlier? Sure enough, Jacques has a route, a predictable one. You follow it the next few mornings and confirm. He starts at the bakery, loops past the fountain, pauses by a lamppost, never the same one twice, and finally trots home. A gentleman's constitution. You leave a treat for him by the second lamppost. He sniffs it, cocks his head, and moves on. You feel oddly honored, but not all dogs are so consistent. You hear of a basset hound named Madame Saucisse, known for her deliberate misdirection. She fakes a squat in one alley, trots to the next, and delivers the payload in total silence. A master of deception. The cartographers are stumped. In response, one member begins marking false positives with a blue star. Another proposes tiny flags for citizens to plant beside each find. Red for known dog, yellow for mystery, and green for possibly human. That last one sparks controversy. The less said, the better. Still, this quirky movement takes off. Artists create ceramic paw prints to mark historic drop zones. A pub offers discounts to anyone who submits a hand-drawn dog map. And a poet, possibly Gerard again, writes, "What once was left, we now record, with compass, chalk, and scent ignored. The story lies beneath our feet, a city's tale in doggy treat." Even government officials, previously dismissive, begin attending cartography meetings. One proposes dog behavior density zones to assist in sanitation planning. Another, clearly out of touch, suggests collecting and weighing the data. That man is food gently but firmly. You attend one final gathering under the Pont Louis-Philippe, where children chalk outlines of imagined dog breeds beside real deposits. One child draws a unicorn, another, more practically, labels a pal Maurice again. Then the rain comes, you watch as the chalk blurs, the ink runs, and the stories vanish under a wash of clean water. For a moment, Paris gleams, if not spotless, at least refreshed. The traces are gone. The dogs will return, but the knowledge remains. You walk home slower that night, eyes to the ground, not to avoid, but to understand. Every step in Paris is part of a story, and now you're part of it too. The sun is setting behind the slate rooftops, casting Paris in warm gold and soft mauve. You stroll through Rue Vieille du Temple, a street once infamous for its pungent surprises, now noticeably cleaner. Not spotless, Paris will always be Paris, but calmer, better navigated, and, dare you say it, just a little more dignified. But tonight isn't about policy or pamphlets or experimental dog scoopers. Tonight, you're going to a party. Yes, a party. You were invited by Leonie, the bespectacled seamstress from the Watchers of the Pavement. She says it's the first annual Bal des Semelles Courageous, the ball of the brave soul. A celebration of everyone who's made even the tiniest difference in reclaiming Paris's streets, one careful step at a time. The venue, a repurposed stable now decked out in lanterns, strings of dog silhouettes, and a curious red carpet made from repurposed upholstery scraps. You step inside and are handed a tiny medal, a copper shoe with a star on a toe. You've earned it, says the man at the door. Inside, it's a riot of soft music, quiet laughter, and odd confessions. A man in a cravat tells you he once cleaned his neighbor's stoop anonymously for 3 months. They think it's divine intervention, he grins. A young woman reveals she's been leaving bouquets beside cleaned up messes, positive reinforcement for humans, even Madame de la Roche. The same noblewoman who once tried to outlaw dogs in her arrondissement is here, now boasting about her dachshund's lavender-scented Hygiene satchel. A toast is raised to the dodgers, the scoopers, the chalkers, and the map makers, to those who saw something foul and turned it into fellowship. Applause rings out, someone begins playing a waltz. And then, wonderfully, an elderly man releases 6 papier-mâché dogs on wheels, each trailing a colorful streamer. They glide through the room like parade floats. The crowd howls with joy. You drift through conversations. One couple met while reaching for the same discarded pamphlet. A boy recites poop-themed riddles to polite applause. A cook sings a song about Rue des Red Slippers, a legendary alley where no one has stepped in anything for 200 days. You ask someone, so is Paris clean now? They laugh. No, but it's cleaner, and that counts. You wander onto a terrace where a telescope is aimed not at the stars, but at a statue in the square below. Someone's tied a ribbon around its base with a note that reads, "To all who stepped aside and all who chose to clean." You lean on the balustrade, breathing in the scent of jasmine and faint dog biscuit. The streets below are darkening, quieting, easing into that time of night when Paris becomes part dream, part memory, and it hits you. This whole ridiculous, winding, dung-dappled story wasn't just about excrement. It was about attention, about noticing what you're told is beneath notice, about caring, even when it's not your job. Especially then. Historians still argue whether the campaign to clean up Paris ever succeeded, whether dog waste declined because of policy or pride or parity. But everyone agrees on one thing. Paris never stopped being itself. As you leave the party, your foot catches on something. You look down. Not poop, just a silk ribbon. You pick it up and tie it to a railing. A small absurd offering. A wink to the next passerby. And with that, you turn toward home. The streets are damp but passable. The dogs are quiet. The city exhales. It has been a journey, hasn't it? The bells of Paris toll faintly in the distance, echoing over cobbled streets, still warm from the day. Your pace slows now. No more corners to turn, no more pamphlets to read, just the hush of old stone and night breeze. You find a bench beneath a sleepy tree. The leaves above rustle with the softest sighs. Somewhere far off, a dog lets out one lazy bark, and then silence again. The lights of Paris shimmer dimly, reflecting in puddles, dancing along the river. You listen to your breath. Inhale, exhale. Everything has softened. Even memory. You think of Jacques, of Madame Saucisse, of that absurd contraption with its scoop and bell. You picture the watchers chalking symbols on curbs. You remember the child who wrote Maurice again, and the man who toasted to cobblestones with conviction. Funny, isn't it? How something as small and unpleasant as a mess in the street could lead to all that connection, comedy, even care. The city hasn't changed overnight. It never will. but maybe you have. Maybe the next time you walk down your own street, wherever you are, you'll notice the ground beneath your feet a little more. Maybe you'll smile at a passing dog or nod to someone who scoops and walks away. Maybe you'll remember that strange, wonderful night when Paris became a little cleaner, a little kinder, one pile at a time. Now, close your eyes, let the lanterns fade, let the scent of croissants and rain drift past. You are safe, you are warm, you are gently held in a city of stories. Sleep well, dreamer. We've made it through the muck.